Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Caregiver Coffee Shop podcast. I am so excited to have my guest, who's a repeat guest, Kristina Lucia Andrews, back on the podcast. And before we dive into today's topic, I want to make sure that you hit that subscribe button below if you're watching on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. And definitely make sure that you are following because I have a brand new freebie resource coming out probably within the next month that I want you to be able to get. But you're not going to get that if you don't know what's going on. So be sure to hit that like, follow, and subscribe button so you'll be able to see my stories and get updates about when that will drop. And there's more coming. So that's just a taste. So just wait. So anyway, on to the actual episode here. Kristina, for those of you who may not have caught our previous episodes, is a children's book author and a professional artist. She is passionate about helping adults who have dealt with trauma, past hurts, hangups, move through that in a healthy way using the creative arts, as well as obviously help their kids. Because let's face it, if you yourself are an adult and have gone through a traumatic, painful experience, the last thing we want to do is pass that on to our kids. And for those of us who are in the caregiving world, we've had a lot of extra stress put on our shoulders as couples, as parents, and then our children are absorbing that. So I really love how Kristina's work is centered around using the creative arts in terms of literature to help us have a way to open up the conversation about these big feelings, these big stresses that come unexpectedly sometimes in life, whether it's stuff that we can't control, whether it's stuff we can. Having a tool like her work is amazing. And she has a lot of books coming out in the next couple of years, this year and into next year. So definitely be sure to follow Christine on Instagram if you haven't already, and we'll include those details at the end. So definitely stay tuned. But anyway, Kristina, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me back. It's really a pleasure to be back here with Bella.
Yeah, hi Bella. For those of you who may not be watching but might be listening, Bella is the main character of her children's series. Her name's Bella the elephant, and basically her series is centered around Bella going through just experiences as she's growing up. And the first book that I got the chance to read with my daughter that Kristina wrote was about transitioning from a crib to a big girl bed. And that, I tell you, for me and my own motherhood experience was like, oh boy, here we go. So having that kind of, I love that. Just the simplest things. It does not have to be like really hardcore, like say abuse or neglect or something like that. Although this could help address that. I can see how your book, Kristina, could help in that capacity as well. But life is hard and full of emotions. And Kristina, I would love you to just kind of open up a little bit and share a little bit about a short snippet of your backstory of what got you down this path of using creative arts to help so many people with emotions and just trauma, because it is one of those touchy, subjects that people do not like to go to. So take it over.
Oh, thank you. No, I totally agree. And it's a very complex subject. It is a mountain. And what I realized from my healing journey is taking the mountain and breaking it down. I've always been a creative. I started formally training in art when I was 7 years old. And my parents noticed a natural ability. However, I was taken to a teacher that was able to mold and nurture that ability and take it a step further. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. The way I draw, the way I create, there is a lot of years of practice and training behind it. And same thing with my dancing, same thing with my crochet, same thing with my knitting. It is a discipline. It is, and yes, discipline does come to me naturally. What really brought me to understanding, because for a long time I hid my creativity, even though at a very young age it was recognized. At the same time, it wasn't recognized. It was really odd. I remember very clearly at 12 years old drawing. Actually, I was a little older. I was 14. And I drew a little girl and boy, it was a watercolor for my cousin and his then wife, and as their wedding present. And my cousin's wife at the time looked at me and said, "Oh, I thought it was just your sister that drew, not you." And I remember being so hurt and not knowing how to say I was hurt because of, again, like being so disciplined and working so hard, not just I mean, yes, people acknowledge there's a natural ability in me, but they're also very clear, you need to work at this. If you don't work at this, if you don't cultivate this, you're not going to reach the heights you're able to reach. And that's something that was unique for me as opposed to other people around me. Like, people have always been a little more disciplined with me, a little more rougher with me, which I can say is good and bad in some ways. But when I got into a horrible, horrible fight with my mom in my early 30s. And that's what led me to going to therapy. And through
Mhm.
going through therapy, I realized that there was a huge lack of communication in the environment I grew up in. And I realized because of that, I didn't know how to talk about my feelings. My therapist asked me that first session, how are you feeling? I had no idea how to answer. You might as well put like Arabic in front of me and ask me to translate it. Like, I had no idea how to do that. And also, and through my therapy work, I realized because I grew up in a family I didn't belong in, I was putting myself into work environments I didn't belong in either. So that's why I was working corporate during the day and creating during the night. But my creating, that was like my secret time. Some people knew and some people didn't know. Like, some people saw the way I stood at the water cooler and they're like, what are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm a
Right.
dancer. And they're like, oh, it makes sense now. Because they look at me like, you don't belong here. And I'm like, yeah, I need to make a living. Like, what am I supposed to do? And
Right.
that was a really big thing in my healing journey. And what I realized,
Okay, real life happens. It never fails. Even when I'm doing meetings or a podcast, life happens. So had to take a little pause in there for a phone call for my dad, but that's okay. So anyway, but Christina, going back to what you were saying before we had that interruption, I apologize for that, that you didn't realize how what you didn't, you don't know what you don't know. Like when you've been in one situation for so long, you don't know any other way, or that because you've known no different. When you're not nurtured, for example, from what, like I'm hearing from what you're sharing in your story, you didn't know that there was that you were lacking nurturement and encouragement and a way to have an outlet, to be openly honest about your need for being creative with your creative outlets to
yeah,
handle and cope with your emotions. And I think that is so important for both caregivers and even just parents in general, that they understand that if you've grown up in an environment like that where you've known no other way, and this could be very helpful, I think, too, like if you're married to a spouse that has known no other way, that it's not their fault, for one. And two, that is such an important piece into moving forward with your marriage, as well as how you come together to blend to nurture and encourage your children. And I know, speaking from my experience, that's definitely been the case. My husband's grew up in a rough home with some challenges, and then I grew up in a stable home, and I'm very thankful for that. But definitely, for sure, when people have known no other way, it's hard to just instantly just switch and process and how to handle that. And I love that with creative arts, there's a way to do that. It's a way to heal and just share. Like with your literature, you're sharing essences, I can tell from your books, of your story and like things that you felt, and you're trying to help other parents
yeah,
and children not go through that same pain point. So if what would a question, so let me back up here, my brain's getting ahead of my mouth here, sorry. So if a parent came to you and they're like, I've been in a hard situation like you have growing up, and I'm just struggling to figure out how to not let that be the story for my son or my daughter, what would be some baby steps that they could take to move in the right direction to help them nurture their creative arts? So what is like one of the three tips that you would want to give to help our parents, caregivers, even if they're realizing maybe too that they're burning out and tapping out and need to kind of just let it out? What would be some simple ways for them to start that doesn't seem overwhelming, or like, you know, that's to the extreme?
absolutely. It's definitely baby steps. And the baby steps are going to help you connect with both your inner child and your critical parent. So if you've been in a situation like that, this is going to sound very selfish, but it's very crucial. You need to focus on yourself. You need to focus on, what do you need? If you need 5 minutes in the morning for your tea or coffee, that's okay. You're not a bad human being. You're actually good. If you are a quality time person, but you need alone time. And maybe it's hiring a sitter or asking a family friend or a grandparent to watch your kids for an hour so you can take a walk around the block. It's really about you sitting down with just yourself and identifying, what do I need to be sane? What do I need to be calm? What do I need for my little girl, my little boy to come out and play? And that's when we say creative arts. We're talking about things that allow us to play. Like people think, I say this all the time. People think as adults, like we don't play. We do play. I'm in New York. The Apple Store is a perfect example of an adult playground, and it's brilliant from a marketing point of view. But we're too adults like, no, we don't play, we don't do this. But like, no, we need to play. It's important to play. Like it's like our children have play dates. We have play dates, whether that's like getting together with your friends after church and having a coffee or tea, or it's going on a Friday
Mhm.
night. Like that's really important. And it's the same thing as like date night, having that time with your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or whoever it is. So that baby step, I realize I kind of went a little broad there, but that baby step is you sitting down and finding something that you can do for just you, and
Right.
something you can do that makes you feel good, that brings you joy, that makes you feel happy. The other piece is, again, setting boundaries, and I realize that can sound really rough and really hard, but being able to say to your child or your spouse, I need this time, and being
Mhm.
able to communicate it calmly in a way that's not accusatory. Like oftentimes we hear people share, acknowledge, like, I was angry and I snapped at my spouse, or I was angry and I snapped at my child. And we're all human. It's going to happen. It's not perfect, but I've noticed for me that when I'm talking about a situation that deeply, there was a conversation I had with a loved one where they did something that was very painful to me. And I was able, it was long after the fact, but I was able to calmly say, this really hurt. And they were able to apologize. And that was a big learning curve for me to
Mhm.
understand that. And I realized sometimes we don't have that time to process the emotions. Sometimes we don't have time to process,
Right.
communicate. But I've been learning, like one time someone, this is like totally random, but one time one of my neighbors, I was 5-10 minutes late taking my stuff out of the dryer. They had taken my stuff out and put it on top of the dryer, which in my OCD mind was dirty, because it is dirty. It needs to be wiped down. And this
Right. Right.
neighbor that never takes their stuff out on time, that always delays me. And I was so angry. I was I was raging, and I could not speak to this person. And
Right.
luckily they left. Like, thank God they left. Like I just knew I was so angry. I could not speak. Like
Mhm.
that was, and I made that choice to not speak because I knew I wouldn't. And then vice versa, I had another neighbor that, and this has happened several times, where they talked to me in a very condescending manner. I'm president of my co-op board, and they talk to me like I'm an employee, and they order me to do things. And when that happens, I'm registering. I'm like, okay, this is wrong. And I don't respond back because I don't know. I'm still working. It's something I'm still working on. I'm still working on how to calmly say in the moment, this is not right. Like
Mhm.
the way you're talking to me is very disrespectful. I feel demeaned. Like, but I'm sharing this because I want to share that it is a work in progress. It is, but again, I personally not knowing how to communicate in that moment, I
Mhm.
have been learning to make a choice not to say anything. And I remember the first time it happened, walking away and thinking, you need to find a strategy. You need to find a strategy. So when this person does it to you again, you have a calm response. So because they're completely unaware. And even
Mhm.
though they're grown adults, they're completely unaware. And that's the other big thing I'm learning. So I think it's a matter of finding something that brings you joy on a daily basis and how to make time for that joy. Then also setting boundaries with those around you where it's understood and it's respected. And the other thing I'll throw in there too, because this is something that's really helped me, and I always have it up on my desktop, is the feelings list. And the feelings list is really important, especially when you're learning how to talk about your feelings. If you're struggling, like even if it's a couple of hours after you've gone through it and you're like, gosh, I really want to identify how I was feeling in that moment, just pulling up that cheat sheet and looking at the list and be like, oh, I was feeling agitated, or oh, I was feeling disgruntled, or I was feeling elated, or I was feeling joyful. There's something very powerful about going beyond the basic emotions of happy, sad, angry. There's so many emotions and feelings out there, and being able to break it down more specifically, I find just very powerful. It's just like more tools in that toolbox for you to have.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that baby steps. So, because like when we're trying to implement anything new, it's overwhelming. We can't we can't run a marathon right out the gate. We have to
No.
work up to it. We got to put in the time to work out and
Yeah.
hydrate and build that muscle tone and that endurance. So we can that long form endurance to be able to do something like that. Absolutely. But then also too, it's not one and done. Just first time you attempt something, it's probably going to flop, and that's okay. It's part of the process. You try, then you tweak, you try again, you tweak, you try again. It's not just one and done. And I think it's important to highlight too with this too, that since you're incorporating when we're dealing with emotions and how to process and share those in a healthy and untoxic way, especially in our relationships with our children, our significant others. It's a work in progress too about understanding each person. I very much am an extrovert. My husband, I think, is more an introvert. So when you have that kind of dynamic, that definitely comes into play too. Different personality types, how they process. I definitely am more of a talker and I need to process out loud. I do journal as well, but it's still an essence of me that I need to have a conversation about it sometimes. Not where I'm necessarily getting advice, but
Yeah.
I'm just needing to talk out loud about what I'm feeling to kind of just get it out and just be able to help kind of my brain process and wrap my head around what
Yeah.
I'm feeling. Emotions are so complicated. And when you're dealing with past hurts, with trauma, when you've known no other way, baby steps, setting
Yeah.
those boundaries for implementing small changes to help you be consistent, and then giving yourself grace if it flops. And then, excuse me, then tweaking and trying again as necessary. And there's or right, no wrong or right way. And that's okay. Oh, I think she froze. More tech issues. Sorry about that, guys. But yes, my husband's I'd say is more of an introvert. I'm an extrovert. So sometimes I just need to talk it out to really process what my brain's trying to deal with. And that's okay. So I think when you're doing these baby steps, and especially if it is going to be part of your marriage or your relationship with your significant other, or even with your kiddos, thinking about boundaries that you can do that will teach them that, hey, I need this for one. This is non-negotiable. I really need this to be able to cope and process so I don't feel targeted or unsafe. But that is also respectful. So like I know one thing I've done with my daughter when I want to write, when I want to work on a knitting project, one thing I've done is set a timer and say, okay, this is mommy's time, but when you're done, when this timer goes off, I'm done. Have I always been good about doing that? Not necessarily, but I'm working on it. But that's a tool that is helping me. Maybe another thing I did with a recent podcast, I had Erin Woodruff on, who's a communication coach, a week or so ago. And one thing that she talked about in that episode that I really have been leaning into is how you open up a conversation, especially if it is with your significant other, of giving them the freedom of where they don't feel targeted. So even just the
Yes.
wording of like, hey, I need to ask you a really deep question. Is this okay right now? They say
Mhm.
no, it's not a good time. They say yes, then they're opening the gateway to that conversation. So just little things like that. It doesn't have to be rocket science, guys. It's just really trying to learn how to approach these really sometimes hard conversations and just deal with the things that, don't feel good that we're dealing with or that we know our spouse or
Yeah.
children don't feel good about, and how to do so in a healthy way. So Kristina, what
Actually,
is some
I'm
what?
sorry. I just wanted to say, I love how the communication coach and how you're sharing this. I mean, interrupt you, but I love
No,
how
you're
she
fine.
shared about not accusing, because that's a big thing that I'm learning in my communication too, is you don't want
Yes.
to attack somebody. That's not the point of communicating or saying this hurt me or this upset me. It's about calmly laying the pieces on the table and allowing them to come to realizations and vice versa, you know? And so I love how the coach said that, because accusing and snapping at each other actually lead to more snowballs. They actually lead to more chaos in the future, because it's the small things. It's like, you know, you're at parties and you hear couples fight over who like ate the last cookie, or, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, it's like, but it's those small things though that build up to bigger things and that cause chaos. And that's when we start accusing, and then we start like misunderstanding. And then when it gets into bigger, deeper subjects, and when things get more complicated. So I just wanted to point that out. I love how that coach shared that, because that's something that I learned too, is like talking in a calm manner, not being accusatory, like really opening our hearts and minds to listen to the other person really makes a difference. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's
No,
easy. There are
no.
times where I walk out of the room if I can't do it. Like there are times where I table it and I don't respond, but there are times where it happened to me in Easter weekend, where one of my family members said something to me that I disagreed with, but I said, well, and I asked them, I said, well, could you explain this to me? Could you share your point of view with me? And of course I heard it and I still didn't get it, but like I respected it, because if they're saying that, okay, they have a right to say that and they have a right to feel that way, you know. But I just wanted to share that. I love how the coach said that. I love that you're sharing that too.
Yeah. And listen, guys, take what we're saying with a grain of salt here. Okay. Again, there's no right or wrong way. Everyone is different. We all have a different personality. We all have different experiences. We all have different point of views. And we certainly, with our unique brains, none of us have a brain that's exactly the same, even genetically speaking. With our children, they have part of us, but it's not all of us. So with
Mhm.
that in mind, we all process things in a different way. And so part of this process is figuring out, first and foremost, like Kristina said at the beginning of this episode, of focus first on you. You need to figure out what makes you tick and how you process and how you cope. So you can then know how to set those boundaries. And also it helps you figure out, okay, how do I explain that or present that to your significant other? And also just even lay the foundations for helping your children figure out, okay, how do we process this? Yelling and screaming doesn't always work. As parents, I will say that it's hard not to when you're driven up the wall, because you're dealing with kids that just, I said no, no, no means no. Anyway, that's a whole nother tangent. But anyway, this stuff I know is not easy. And I really hope this inspires you to get creative. One thing that my husband and I have gotten into lately is adult coloring books. It's so relaxing. We like doing that, and we can just do that. And there's different ones for like different things that we love. Like my husband, he loves Batman and Marvel and, all that kind of stuff. And then I personally love Downton Abbey, and I also love Christian Bible verses. So my husband bought me two. He bought me a Downton Abbey one with some of my favorite quotes from the movies and the series and pictures, and then one with some Bible verses in it, and just really calming pictures, wording, and stuff like that. So there's different ways. So or if you're into the needle art, Kristina mentioned she loves crocheting. I've been knitting since I was 10 and I love it. So be okay and open with trying things. Or I would even say too, like if you've been just having this nudge for an annoying nudge for a long time, and that about a hobby or a passion that you want to try something new, and you've just tabled it maybe because of COVID or other extenuating circumstances with your caregiving journey, with your motherhood journey, here's the green light to go for it. You only get this one life. And even though you're stressed and dealing with maybe past hurt, hangups, uh, stress of being a mom and a caregiver for both a spouse and an aging parent, like kind of what I'm dealing with in the season I'm with now, this is your one life. And making sure that you nurture this one life that you're in, where you're spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally investing in yourself daily, this is the time to do it. And there is no right or wrong way to do it. But the most important thing that we want you to take is start today. Take one baby step in the right way today. That's what Christine and I really want you to do. So,
Yeah.
Christina, what is something, either you can spin this question two ways. What is something that we've talked about in our conversation today that's just really resonated with you? Or what is maybe one thought or affirmation or positive experience that just really has stayed with you through your own journey of dealing with how to process your past hurts and hangups and realize that it is a marathon and it's not a one and done journey with your emotions.
Oh, absolutely. Well, one thing that really resonated is when you said that you and your husband have both been doing adult coloring together. Coloring is an activity. I'm actually in the process of designing my first coloring book in my series right now. I always have the coloring pages available, and I really believe in coloring because it is a calming activity. It is great for all ages. But what you pointed out when you mentioned about you and your husband doing it is that you found ways for it to work for each of you. You both found, like, he does his books, you do your books, you both found interests that identify with you. And the fact that he went out and he listened to you and knew, okay, this is what Melissa likes. This is what brings Melissa calm. Like, that's communication. And that's what we're going for. And that's why in my books, in the back, activities beyond the
Mhm.
book.
Yeah,
That's
I
why I
love
would say
that.
oh, thank you. But that's why I say they're gentle suggestions, because every kid is different. My nephew is 2.5, and my sister and her husband switched his crib to a toddler bed when he started climbing out. But meanwhile, my friend Nikki was the one that first told me about moving the crib into the big girl room. And then another influencer who I follow in Ireland did the same thing for her daughter. She and her husband did the same thing for their daughter. So, every family is unique, every couple is unique. And I feel that you're sharing the story of the coloring books that you and your husband are doing together. That's a beautiful example that you don't have to be doing the exact same coloring book, the exact same thing. Like, you can still do something, have a common denominator, but also have room for variation. I think that's really important, because I think there's this thing like, we all have to sit and watch the movie for the whole duration of this hour, and no one can move and no one can breathe. And I've
No
been
one
in
can have a different
situations.
say so. Exactly.
Yeah. And I've
And,
been in
and yeah,
situations.
exactly. And what I love about this too is that our daughter does it with us. Like, there was one night
That's the
last week
thing.
where
Yeah.
my husband was in the recliner. He was coloring his book. I had my Downton Abbey coloring book, and she had some of her new coloring books she got over Easter from some family. So it was something we could all do together. So think about it that way.
Yeah.
Can the activity be translated not just something to nurture your marriage with your relationship with your significant other, but
Yeah.
can you do it with your daughter? I color with my daughter a lot now because she loves it. I have my own coloring books. She has her coloring books. We'll sit at the dining room table and just color. So
That's
there's more
amazing.
than one way to do it, and there's more than one way to nurture multiple relationships. And again, it doesn't necessarily have to be coloring. Could it be something
Yes.
else? So,
Lovely.
model. I'm thinking about guys. What is one thing that they like? Cars. Model cars. I have some people I know that they like to build model the dads and with their sons, like, or even their daughters too. Depends on,
Yeah.
if you have a tomboy, but daughter.
Right.
But anyway, but it doesn't matter. But yeah, if they like to build models, there you
Yeah.
go. There's another way to create something off of a topic, and they just choose, like, model cars that they're really passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. The idea here is that we just want you to get started,
Yeah.
because that's how
Well,
progress gets going with your healing journey.
yeah.
So, Tina, we've mentioned your books, and I know, my dear, I'm on your list, and I've been following you. You got a ton of stuff happening this year.
I
So, for
do.
the rest of our listeners out there who are not in Christina land, where can people follow you, and what in the name of Mike do you have coming up next on deck for 2023? Because you're busy. I've noticed
Yeah,
you are busy.
I
So drop
am.
us some
Yeah.
info about where we can follow you, what you got coming up, so people know where to follow your work.
Absolutely. So I'm most active on Instagram. I do have an email list, which I would love to have everybody on. I do have a coloring drawing, which I will share with you, Melissa. So you have the link for the show notes, and that will be on my email list. And when you're on my email list, I always share my most current coloring drawings with you. And I am a blogger as well. I do other things as well that I post in there. I keep you updated on my books. I am going to have more books coming out this year. I am going to, like I said, I'm working on my coloring book, which is going to be coming out this summer, ideally. I'm also working on an activity book for Christmas, which I'm super excited because I'm a Christmas nutcase. And like one funny thing that I'll share with your audience too, as like a little like sneak peek. I actually am working on I'm going to be working on an Advent coloring drawing.
Yay!
And yeah, so I saw that. So that's like one of my, it's so funny because everyone's like, Kristina, you're a maniac. You're like, go, go, go. But I'm like, no, I'm go, 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 because I'm anticipating a lot of travel for this summer and this fall / the holidays. And also from a marketing point of view, and this is where the discipline comes in, I want to have things ready for a certain for the holiday drops. And so this summer, I thought, what, if I can be at this point in the illustration process, okay, I can do this and I can focus on creating this drawing, because I do have this image of Bella and her friends ice skating in Central Park and then the New York skyscape. You know what I mean? It's going to be, because you figure it's going to be 24 days of coloring, leading up to Christmas.
Right.
And we're both Christian women. So, it's like,
Yeah,
it's a big,
absolutely. Oh, I love it. Okay, so guys, go follow Kristina on Instagram. She goes live on there, and she's been on some podcast episodes too. So besides my, okay, disclaimer. And she's her email, get on her email list. It does have drops for like details coming out for her books. So much going on and so much good stuff and resource for you to if you need some tools for how to just start this process, especially if it is centered around your kids and figuring out a healthy way to deal with those big, strong emotions. So it's really important. It's good stuff. It's going to be amazing. So definitely check out Kristina. And as always, guys, remember that you are doing the best you can. Okay. Life is hard. It's not your fault if you've had to deal with some things that, in how you were raised and just life throwing curveballs at you and your family now as you're raising your own family. Health things happen, other scary things happen. It's not entirely your fault. Okay. It's not your fault. So give yourself grace, take one baby step at a time, and never, ever stop picking yourself up. You are not alone in this journey. And if you need support, if you're dealing specifically with past hurts and traumas and not being in a nurturing type environment, definitely reach out to Kristina. She's amazing, and she can definitely get you hooked up and on the way to healing in a healthy way. If you're struggling with your caregiving journey, definitely be following me on the podcast. Again, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you're watching this. Hit that like and subscribe button so you will be notified when more episodes are up. And definitely follow me on Instagram, because I have new details about a brand new free resource coming, as well as a new mini membership coming soon. So that's all I'm going to say for now. You got to follow your girl over on Instagram to get the latest details. So anyway, Kristina, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, even amid all the glitches and interruptions. It's been a joy to have you on. And I know this episode of what we talked about today is going to help a lot of people out there, because, again, emotions are hard. Life is hard. And if you don't have the wherewithal to know there is another way to do it, you're stuck. And that's no way to live. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, you're welcome. One thing, if it's okay if I share one quick thing, I just wanted to share when you were saying about before, something you said really beautifully. Like when I told one of my family members about the healing work I do, I'm a member of adult children of alcoholics. And I told my sibling, I said, you realize through that when you do your inner child and critical parent work, you also realize you have a choice and responsibility. And to me, as a Catholic woman, that's a big part of my faith, is that I do strongly believe that God bestows us with free will. However, he also gives us a choice and responsibility with that free will.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget turning to my sibling and saying, I want to be the best version of myself. I want to be the best version of a sister, the best version of an aunt, the best version of a future wife. I want to be the best human I can be. And when you take that choice and responsibility, it's very empowering. And I'm not saying it's easy, because I think we both have been very honest as a work in progress, but I just wanted to, I know we have to wrap, but I just wanted to share that we do have a choice. And we do have a responsibility. And when we recognize that, it is very, very empowering. And these doors open for us. And I know it's scary. I acknowledge it's scary. But when you do find that moment where you're ready to walk through that door, it's really enlightening. It's very empowering.
Absolutely. And I love that you said, we have a choice. God aligned the stars. My devotional this morning was about that, about
Oh, really?
We have choosing about, are you paying attention to what you say,
Yeah.
what you do? And even it brought up feelings too. Are you really acknowledging what you're feeling and how that's impacting what you say and what you do, in terms of being a Christ-like disciple, like agreeing
Yeah.
to disagree, like, sometimes when part of, I think, with the problem that we get stuck in with dealing with emotions is it has to be one way or my way or the
Yes.
highway, or the other person's point of view. It has to be their way or the highway.
Yeah.
And that's not the way it is at all. And that's not how God intended it either. He wants us to be open and calm and compassionate and give grace to one another, and
Yeah.
also give grace and compassion to ourselves, because we're human beings. We're not perfect. Only Heavenly Father is perfect, and we will never be. But the best thing that we can do is by making that conscious choice to choose to be more Christ-like in our daily walk with Him as well. And I encourage you too, guys. It's not about being perfect. We're not going to be the perfect parents, the perfect spouse, the perfect caregiver. The list goes on. The perfect aunt, the perfect sister, the perfect daughter. Okay, the perfect does not exist, but we can be the best version of ourselves by choosing to put in the work. And that's where we're trying to go with this. Okay, so if you flop, you're not a bad person. If you flop, it doesn't mean you're past all hope. If you flop, it just means maybe you haven't found the right thing that works for you yet. And in my 37 years of trying to grow spiritually, because that is really an essence of who I am too, I'm just now finding things that really tick and work for me. And it's been a lifetime of trial and error. And I know it will continue to be a process and a marathon up until the day God calls me home. Same thing is true with
Right. Right.
if it's a